I had always wanted to die because my dad killed himself by drinking himself to death. And so I thought that was my path. And the minute I realized I was going to be a father, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Get like 4 years sober, I'm drinking mouthwash. I find myself at my old dealer's house in a half hour, and now I've got a job, a truck, a pocket full of cash. Wife at the time, and she says, "Don't forget you got to pick up the cake for your son's birthday tonight." I was so afraid to tell anybody. It's like all my friends in high school knew if Jared got chills, something bad's gonna happen.
You're a medium.
I believe everybody has this ability. We're born with it.
People that are religious would view what you do as like heresy, devil work. What's your response to that?
So here's the ironic part. My first memories are of like stepping over people who are passed out on the ground and like the whole house being like people passed out everywhere. And like as a kid, I would steal all these beer cans that were left over and filter out the cigarettes out of them and like make one big beer out of it and drink it as, you know, so those are kind of some of my first memories are like of shotguns being taken away and fights. So those are some of my first like memories. It's like some of the first things I can remember.
Wow. How did that spill over into your social life, that kind of home life?
I was very afraid of conflict, right? And like in my temper. And so at a young age, I had a pretty bad temper, but I was always afraid of like, I did a lot to stay away from getting angry to the point to a fault. If there was any kind of argument or anything, I would do anything to avoid it. So that was my first kind of idea that I was a little different because I was just afraid. I mean, the truth is I was afraid. Did I know I was afraid? No, but I did feel different. In the environment I was in, I would be in the living room with a whole bunch of adults who were passing marijuana around, right? Like to be passing joints around. And, you know, and they'd say, "Here, pass this over there." And I'd be in the circle, so I'd be passing the joint around. Well, it didn't take long before I just started taking a hit off it because that's what everybody was doing. So
how old were you, do you think, when?
I was probably 12.
Yeah.
So by the time I was 13, 14, I was using like something all the time. I was finding alcohol. I was smoking weed. I was, you know, anything like that. By junior high, I was pretty well like every day.
Weed and booze?
Yeah, weed and booze.
Did it ever delve into drugs?
Oh, yeah.
It did?
Oh, yeah.
By junior high, high school, what did that path look like?
Right before high school. Yeah, right before high school. I moved locations, so I'm not going to the school with all my other friends. I get moved to a different place, and I'm going to this new school. I literally am on my bike in the morning, riding to my first day of freshman year of high school. I ride my bike. I get closer and closer to the school, and the fear, like, just starts. Fear just creeps up. I'm on my way to school. Fear gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time I get to the school, I'm so afraid that I just drive right past it. I drive right past school.
Fear of what people think.
I don't
fear
even
of
know.
If you're going to fit in.
I was just terrified. Like
that's a very common thing in people with addiction issues.
I drove right past the school and went to a park, and I stayed at the park every day for like a month and a half.
Dang.
Every day. Not having fun, not enjoying myself. Just terrified. And you know, once you miss that first day.
Oh yeah. Just compounds.
And so a month and a half goes by and they finally call my mom and they're like, "Hey, how come, you know, we thought he was, you know," and she's like, "You haven't been going to school." You know, and of course, what do I look like? Just a bad kid, right? But you know, you know, and I don't even know. I'm just terrified. And I'm a man. I'm not, you know, I'm a boy, but I think I'm a man, and I'm not going to tell you I'm terrified, right? I'm not going to tell people. That's the problem. We don't tell each other these things, right? We don't talk about it. We don't tell each other when we're afraid, and that's part of the problem. So anyway, that's my first like huge where fear just like rules my life, right? It just ruled my life. So I did not start out high school well. I was already behind from the gate, and I already had this I don't care attitude, right? I have a learning disability. I don't want everyone to think I'm stupid, so I basically just guessed on my placement tests. I just filled in the dots on purpose.
It's almost like taking. I can relate to that. I also have I have ADHD pretty bad that really affected my school. The placement tests, I did smiley faces like as bubbles and stuff. It was almost like a way to control that. You know, I'm in control of this. Not like I can't fit in with everyone else. Like I choose to be bad. I choose to go this route. I choose to not go. And it did give a little sense of control. I don't know if that's what it was for you, but that certainly
Exactly.
helped me.
Because at least now it's like, oh, well, I did that. I'm not stupid. I play stupid.
Yeah.
Like, do you understand? Like,
Yes.
oh, I'm just a bad boy.
Yes.
I'm a bad boy, not. So I totally just went into the bad boy role because.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're saying. And that doesn't end well.
Well, that and I had on top of this, I had an unlimited supply of drugs because at the time I had I'll just say I had a limited supply to take as much as I wanted. Okay. So I was taking handfuls at a time. I had no idea that I had like a lot. So I was like the cool guy because I had bags and bags of drugs that I was stealing from my parents, you know, and coming to school with and just sharing with everybody. So bad boy, the guy with all the stuff, you know, all the fake stuff that makes you feel good, right? Like I learned at a very young age, like that made me feel good, right? And you know, it filled that hole, it filled that emptiness inside that I was feeling. Moving forward a little bit, like I'm super into drugs. I'm like strung out all the time. I'm like staying up all night. I'm just doing, you know, like barely getting by, and I get, you know, home life's not good, and I get kicked out. So senior year, I'm sleeping in a park. I'd fall asleep on a park bench, and the sprinklers would come on in the middle of the night and just soak the crap out of me. And I was like, "What am I doing?" You know,
That's rough.
But I had no, you know, I thought that was it. Like, you know, I just didn't know. And so what I didn't talk about is my father died when I was 2 years old. So my dad was an alcoholic. He died of cirrhosis of the liver. He was like not even in his 30s yet. So when the first couple bottles of vodka my mom caught me with, right? She's like, "You're just like your father. He drank, I found vodka bottles everywhere. You know, you drink like you're going to kill yourself like he did." That's what my mom said to me. And, you know, just like the control thing you talked about earlier, I did the same thing with this. Now that you mention it, I said, well, I'm going to take control of that. You're right. I am going to kill myself just like my father did. I'll at least have control of it, and I will do this just like he did. And so I set out from that moment to drink myself to death just like my dad did. So I was partying all the time, I was drinking all the time, staying up all the time. I didn't care. I was going to kill myself. Everyone who knew me knew Jared was trying to do himself in. Like that was my goal. And so again, I'm real bad with remembering for obviously reasons, like the years and how long that went on, but it went on basically until I found out I was going to be a father.
Oh, wow.
I had always wanted to die because my dad killed himself by drinking himself to death. And so I thought that was my path. And the minute I realized I was going to be a father, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, I don't want my kid to feel that way. I don't want my kid to want to kill himself because I killed myself drinking myself to death. Okay? I wasn't even 18 yet. I was almost 18 when I had this epiphany. Okay? For my kid, I was going to stop because I did not want that to happen. I was dead set on it. I meant it. I wanted it more than anything in the world. Anything in the world. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop for him.
That's a distinct cutoff for people that have addiction issues versus just they party too hard or whatever. The experience of desperately wanting to stop and not being able to stop is a different kind of hell. It's just, I wish it on no one.
And that's the next, 14 years.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Is, you know, trying to get sober for him and trying to get sober for them and for the family. And then the next wife, trying to get sober, staying sober for her, you know. And again, in the beginning, I didn't try to get sober. I just didn't want to kill myself anymore. That was it. Like I wasn't trying to get sober. I just didn't want to kill myself. I was going to stay alive now. And so that's a big change, right?
Huge.
Going from
that's a paradigm shift. That's you're going to see the whole world different after that.
Yeah, and that was the first big shift for me. Like it really was. It was like, okay, I can't die now. I've got to live. And then I was introduced to AA. I was introduced to program. I was introduced to that lifestyle. And so I was like, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. You know, yeah, let's try this. But all it did was make me hide it more. You know, I'd get like a year here sober, 2 years sober, and then I'd relapse. And so this is where my abilities start coming in. Okay, so
yeah, I definitely want to talk. You're a medium.
Yeah, so I'm a medium.
So that didn't start as a kid.
It did.
Okay. Anyways, continue your story, and then I do have questions.
And so when I was a kid, my dad always would be around me. Like I thought that was normal. So this dad who was passed would always appear in my dreams. I had the same recurring dream over and over again of him telling me not to go down the same path as him. Like literally there were sharks involved and in a glass bridge. And he was like, don't go this way. This is the way I went.
So a very distinct dream that you kept. Okay.
I had it many times. I got chills just saying that. So if I tell you I get chills, that's just them saying yes. Okay. That's a yes for me. Okay. So that's my dad going, yeah, you had it many times. Like, yeah. So I just thought I could communicate with my dad because I could. Like anytime I would get chills, like all my friends in high school knew if Jared got chills, you listen. All my friends would know, like and this is how my verbiage used to be, like something bad's going to happen. I got a bad feeling. Mm-hmm. And so I always associated these feelings with something bad for the longest time. And another big turning point for me was when that happened. So just to tell this story, we were at a location. We walked into this location and on the way in, I said, whoa, what was that? And me and my friend both turned. He's like, what? And I go, did you feel that? And he's like, no. I said, I just got chills all over. And we both looked to see what it was. And we went into this location. Okay. This was back in my dealing days. Okay. So we go into the location and I tell him, I got a bad feeling something bad's going to happen. And so we scuttle up and we get out of there. That place gets raided.
Oh, wow.
Okay. There was a camera in the hallway when we walked in. And when I said I got a feeling and we both turned, they didn't catch either of our faces on the camera.
Wow.
And from that moment forward, every time I got chills, I paid attention. If I got chills, what? What are you trying to tell me?
What do you think it is, the messaging? Where do you think it's coming from? You think it's your dad?
Well, I did originally. I always thought everything was my dad, and this is a mistake a lot of people make, right? But the truth is it's my guides. So I have a specific guide. I call him the gatekeeper guide. The gatekeeper guide is the guide who is in control of like the gate, right? Mm-hmm. He lets all the information come in. He tells me what I can trust, what I can't trust. He makes me feel everything. So the way the process works is if I try to read you, I don't actually read you. I ask my guide, he gets the information. That's the safe way to do it. That's the way to do it without feeling other people's emotions. That's the safe way to do it. So to answer your question, that's how I get my information.
What would be the unsafe way?
For me to emotionally open myself up to you and feel your emotions.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
This happens a lot in relationships, right? It happens with your wife. Like if your wife's sad, you'll feel sad.
Yeah.
Okay. But you if you're sad and she's sad, then who's fixing it, right? Who's helping? Who's being the strong one? Because you guys have to be, someone's got to be the strong one, right? Someone's got to take care of the kid when the other person's down. Someone's got to be the opposite, right? So anyway, it happens a lot in relationships. You'll see it a lot with mothers and daughters. They'll get so combined with each other that they don't know where one starts and the other one ends. And so it happens a lot.
That makes sense.
It happens a lot.
So are you able to keep the gate closed until you want to open it, the information gate, or does it just sometimes open and you're like, no, I don't want this right now, but they need to tell you something, or the gatekeeper needs to tell you something? How does it work?
Yeah, so he's in charge. As long as I let him be in charge, he only gives me what's safe, right? He only gives me what I need. I'm not open to. I don't just walk around picking stuff up as long as I'm not open to everybody else, right? And so this is a crazy thing, but what I had to learn was like to shut it off. And so I was taught to like block my heart chakra, right? Which again, I told you I don't go into chakras very much because I don't go into all that. I'm not a woo-woo guy, but like you turn it off, right? So I can show you, watch, try. Let me show you a little trick. Go like this and cross your arms. Try it. Okay. So what this does is this blocks your heart chakra, which is where you feel as an empath. Okay. And so when you do this, now you're blocking me. You can't feel me. You can't feel your daughter in the other room. You can't feel, the person outside. You're left with you. So then you have to check, like, okay, you close your eyes and you go, okay, what do I feel like? And then like, I'm a little nervous because we're on a podcast. So I know that's me, right? Like, but I just checked and now I know what I feel like. Okay. So now I know me and I know it's not. And so then I put it down and then I feel the vibration change. Like I feel a difference. That difference is everything else. So the difference is you because you're in the room. Oh, okay. So as I do this, I say, so if I go like this and I'm calm and I go like this and I feel anxious, then guess what? You're anxious.
Okay. That makes sense.
So in order for me to read you, I had to shut myself. I had
and do you
check.
have to do that
I have
physically?
to know me. Right? So it comes down to this.
Know thyself.
I have to know me. So yeah, so that's how I read, right? I know me, right? And then And so the way this worked with recovery is I get into recovery, but I'm struggling through life, not knowing my place, dealing with a lot of fear. I get into recovery. I get like 4 years sober, and then I'm like sneaking, I'm drinking mouthwash. Like I literally like, and so like one of the times I relapsed is one of the first times I relapsed. It was this subtle. Like I'm getting ready. I'm the only one home. I'm brushing my teeth. I drink some mouthwash and squish it around in my mouth. And this is how quickly this can change for you. I got 4 years sober for the first time. I've got this mouthwash in my mouth and I'm swishing it around and it's this subtle. Well, it's already in my mouth. What's the difference if I swallow it?
Mm-hmm. Isn't it bizarre how that works? It's never this shining white light experience. Well, I shouldn't do it. I shouldn't do it. It's all of a sudden your whole opinion of it changed. It's not that big of a deal. It's already in my mouth. Like what's one gonna do? It's a very subtle, insidious, like bizarre train of thinking that takes over. They call it the obsession, if you will.
Obsession of the mind. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And did the thoughts of what that would affect come into mind? No. See, that's the crazy part, because I'll tell you the rest of the story, and it goes like this. I'm swishing this around in my mouth. Well, what's the difference if I swallow it? No one will know. It'll just smell like mouthwash. They're not going to smell the difference because it's already in my mouth if they would quit. So I'd swallow the mouthwash. Well, now I get a little bit of buzz off of it. So now I drink a little bit more mouthwash. So now I'm like, now I've got a big buzz going. And I'm like, whoo. I find myself at my old dealer's house in a half hour. And now I've got a job, a truck, a pocket full of cash. Like I've got money now. And I'm through 4 years sober. I'm at my dealer's house gonna buy an 8-ball of drugs, right? Like that's how fast. And I didn't. That's what happened.
It just started with what's the difference between having it in my mouth or stomach?
That's how subtle it was. Now it gets better because I'm sitting there, and of course I never ended up buying it because I sat there and did some, right. And I like smoking it, so I'm smoking it with this guy that I hadn't seen in years, and I show up, and my phone rings, right, and I look at the phone, and it's my wife at the time, and she says, "Don't forget, you got to pick up the cake for your son's birthday tonight." I didn't even remember it was my son's birthday that night. Like all that went out the window the minute I thought, what if I just swallow it? Like I didn't even think forward that it's my son's birthday. Like I didn't even remember it's my son's birthday party. Like I'm at the dealer's house. Like that's how subtle. It's just one thought, right? And and I didn't think that through. I didn't, I couldn't think of all those things. Like that's how strong addiction is, right? I love to tell that story because that's how it can happen and how subtle it could be.
Yep.
And and it was crazy. So
looking back from that point, could you see signs leading up like, okay, hey, I'm in the danger zone of either drinking or doing drugs that you couldn't see at the time?
Yeah, like right before that, I was doing less meetings type thing and like not meeting with I didn't do my steps.
So looking back, you could see it coming.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay. But I didn't know then. Like
sure, yeah.
So here's what would happen. Every time I would get some sobriety, so I'd get like a couple years, and I'd start working on myself. Like I'd do a little bit of program. I'd actually started getting into the steps a little bit. I'd start looking at myself. Okay, I'd start studying. That's what the program does. So I would get a little bit of sobriety, and all of a sudden I'd start getting messages from spirit more clearly. All of a sudden I would have people appear and want me to help people. I would grudgingly in the beginning, I'd be like, I'm not going to tell them that. I'd have people show up.
Yeah. I'm curious totally sidebarring, but how do you balance information that is being told from the gatekeeper to give to the person with that might hurt the person? Like that's like an ethical type concern.
Yeah, and
right?
in the beginning, that's very difficult. Yeah. Nowadays, I'm pretty like if they give it to me, it's safe. Okay. You know what I mean? They don't give me anything that's not safe.
Is it more than one? What? More than one gatekeeper?
Yeah, there's more than one, but mostly my gatekeeper I just focus on because he's the one that tells me whether I should say it or not, right? I say they because there's lots of helpers, but again, I could be talking to their guide, right? But it's really my gatekeeper. It's kind of confusing because I say I'm tuning into you when I described it, right? Because that is kind of what I'm doing, but I am running everything past my gatekeeper guide. So it is kind of confusing, and I don't claim to understand it at all. Like I don't know. I only know what I know from what I've learned from spirit. I'm not trained. I purposely don't learn about chakras. I purposely don't learn these things so that when I get it, I'm just describing what I get. Do you understand?
I do.
Yeah. So I'd get sober, get a few years in there. I'd start working on myself. I'd get sober. And I'd look at my ego, right? This is where the whole ego thing comes in. And, you start really looking at these things. You put it on paper. You look at what your fears are, which is very underdone in program. But because fears is like the most important thing. And it's just like, they just kind of comb over it. And I'd start getting messages from spirit. My abilities would come. I started having these abilities come back that I didn't use since I was a kid. Right. Like I had a friend pass away. He came to me and he's like, tell my daughter that was me in the dream. And I battled with this for like weeks. I didn't want to do it. And finally I went over and did it. And she's like, and the mom's like, did you have a dream? Yeah, he came, he and I had some details, right? So I do all this. I get back in program a few times. I get a couple years sober here. Same thing. I start noticing my abilities coming back, right? Same thing. So I went in and out of, I got 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, 1 year, for like 14 years straight. Or not 14. Yeah, no, like 19 years straight. Almost 20 years I was in and out of the program.
Painful.
In and out. It was painful. It wasn't so bad that I like was, I wasn't dropping down to complete lows or anything. I was just staying in that area where, it's just, but again,
life's halted. Yeah.
Never did steps, never completely committed. Cause here's the thing, like my past was my monsters were so scary. I couldn't look at them. Right. And that's the truth. Like that's the boogeyman feeling, right? Like I can't deal with those things cause they're so bad. So there's two things really important things I got out of program. And, the first one was like that not being able to tell people what your secrets are. I was so afraid to tell anybody because I thought it was and what it does is it makes you very alone in the world. And my first experience with that was like, so I tell my sponsor, look, I was molested. I was molested by my friend's grandfather. And, I thought I was never going to tell anybody that. Like, this is my big secret. I'm not going to tell anybody that. Like, no way. Okay. And he goes, yeah, that happened to me too. And he goes, hey, John, come here. Tell him what happened to you. Yeah, that happened to me. And then, hey, Jerry, come here.
That must have been freeing though, at the same time.
Chills all over. Yeah. It was it's very, very important because I thought I was alone before that moment. Then I realized I'm in a room full of people with the same experience. If they've all had that experience and they're not, and why nobody's talking about it, right? Like we just don't tell each other these things. We don't tell each other when we're afraid. So that's kind of how it went. I'd get sober, my abilities would come in, then, and Spirit clarified this for me the other day because I always tell people that Spirit would take the gift away, and they're like, we never took it away, Jared. And I'm like, yeah, you're right.
You just blocked it.
I just couldn't use it.
Yeah.
It was me, not them. They don't take it away.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you think everybody can do some form of this, right?
Yes. I believe everybody has this ability. We're born with it. Like I'm not some special, it's not some special magic gift that only a few people have. We all use it in some form. I mean, everybody knows what intuition is. Yeah. Everybody knows when they've had that feeling like, I need to call this person, and then they call, or, everybody has this ability. I think we learn away from it. I think we're born with it, and society teaches us away from it. Because think about a baby. When a baby's born, all they have is this sense. They can't communicate with you by talking. They can't tell you what they need. They can't ask you what they want. All they can do is look at you and give you like a sense, right? And so my point is that everybody can do this. I've just practiced it. You've probably tried this in your life, right? You've tried this for yourself. You get a message for yourself from Spirit, okay? Let me use the example of my wife, okay? It's hard for me to read my wife. It's very difficult for me to read my wife. Either. Well, yeah, I know, right? But I mean, it's hard for me to get a message from Spirit and pass it on to my wife. And here's why. This is a great example that I use all the time because this is a true example. I got a message that my wife is unhappy at work and she needs to quit that job. We need to find something that she's happy because I found something that I'm happy and she needs that. So I get that message very clearly from Spirit. I go to pass it on to her and I say, honey, when we're more financially stable, you should quit that job. So what I did there was I put my own wants, my own needs, and so my own thoughts, my own ideas, and my own ego got in the way there, right? So when I get a message for myself, it's even worse. I know what I'm afraid of. I know what I want to hear. I know. So I can't be what we call a clear channel for myself, right? And so this is where we all test it first, right? When we start having abilities, when people go home and they try it on their families, they try it on themselves. They're like, okay, let me pull a tarot card or let me try this and see what it's telling me, right? But you're not a clear filter, and you're gonna mess that message up before you give it to yourself. And so one of the biggest things that's different between me and you is that I've stood in front of complete strangers and practiced. And that's how you get better at anything, right?
What do you think outside of drugs and alcohol are the most common things that can block this for people? Like like bad behavior or lack of integrity or being jerks to people, doing things you're ashamed of. What do you think?
The major blocks are, it doesn't matter what it is, honestly. I describe it as hiding. So this is what it's like. If you're hiding from one thing, remember I was talking about hiding from my past in recovery? If you're hiding from one thing, you're hiding from everything. You can't block, you can't block like, oh, I did this bad thing, but I'm going to be open to spirit and spirit's going to give me all this love. Like, and God's going to come in, and it doesn't work like that. Once you're hiding, you're kind of like, you're hiding. So I describe it like that. And I learned that from program. Like I had one thing I was hiding from. It was the one thing I didn't tell anybody. As soon as I got rid of that one thing I was hiding from, then it all came in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it doesn't matter what it is. You just can't be hiding.
Yeah.
You've got to be honest. You've got to be truthful. You can't have any blocks.
So I've had actually quite a few people on the show who do what you're describing from a religious sense almost. Like they've learned to hone that intuition and they keep their channel very clean and clear with good behavior and, well-intentioned actions and things. And they get direction and, they can, they just from God. So my question is, people that are religious would view what you do as like heresy, right? Or anti-religious or devil work, or you're playing in something you don't understand. Things are going to attach to you. What's your response to that with people that would say, hey, this is the work of the devil?
If this was something bad, why is it helping me? Why is it? It's not a bad feeling. It's warning me something bad's going to happen. When my kids were being hurt one time, I knew about it. Like I had chills and something was wrong. And I called and said, what's going on? And I knew. So if that's the case, then this isn't evil. This isn't a bad thing.
It'd be how you use it, right?
This is something warning me something bad's going to happen. And so it really changed my whole perspective on what I was getting, what I was feeling. It changed it from being something bad to something useful. So here's the ironic part. Like I get 80% of my people have some kind of addiction issues who come to me like randomly. So it's not like random, right? Like I have this experience. I'm a medium. These people have these issues. They come to me and like my experience helps them along with what I'm getting, right? So that's not a coincidence, right? That's God. That's God. Like that's how that works. And ironically, I had huge problems with religion. So I have the same issue with religion that religion has with me, right? Like, so for the longest time, before I even knew what this stuff was, I've always had a problem with religion, right? And so for whatever reason, I've thought badly of religion. Well, and I'll tell you how I came to that conclusion. So in program, the roots of program are based in mediumship, and people don't know that.
Bill was channeling.
Bill Wilson was a medium, and they used to do seances, and they have a room in their place. I don't know if you know all this, but it's all in the history.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah,
you read that.
This is all pretty new in the last 5-10 years.
It's called the Spook Files, if you look up Spook Files. So I started learning the history of AA, and in learning this history, I started to notice that they were the same. When I found that out, it did another one of those big shifts for me. It wasn't two separate worlds. This is the same thing. Program and this spirituality that I was experiencing, this mediumship, were actually the same all along. And it didn't just stop there. That meant that Christianity was the same thing. They were trying to do the same thing. And that meant Buddhism was the same thing. So that's what that taught me.
All the same as in you're trying to access source or God to do good for people?
I guess. I mean, you're all searching for spirituality.
How does this help people the most? Like, what's the most common relief that you give people?
Well, I guess the short answer to that is that it teaches people that there's no death, right? That there's life after death, and that if I can give evidence that person still knows what's going on in your life, it means that they're not gone. So that's the short answer. But it goes a lot deeper than that.
I'm sure it does.
It goes a lot deeper than that.
Yeah.
But what I'm most excited about is taking the skeptical people, or the people who really wouldn't be involved in this, the people who just don't, who would never do this, and kind of opening their eyes to it and making it more, teaching people that this is obtainable. It's not some magic gift. Like it's not something, oh, those people over there can do, but oh, that's great. But something you can use in your everyday life. Like you're getting messages every day. You're getting help every day, whether you admit it or not, or know it or not, you are. And if you can learn to do what God or Spirit wants you to do, if you can figure that out and do that, your life gets really easy. Like
things flow.
That's the way it works. Like I teach people, it's from God or Spirit, whatever you call it. I just call it Spirit because it's just easier. Because there's so many things attached to the word God, but it's all the same to me. Like I guess is the best way I can explain it. I tell people like, look, if everything falls in place, then you're following what's supposed to be, because that's how it works. When it like you talked about this.
It just effort. Yeah, someone told me, one of the guests on, because I asked, how do you know if God's telling you to go this way or and she said God gives red lights. So if there's friction and things just aren't moving and you're trying to make things happen, stop.
Yep, exactly.
And I could have. My career could have been a lot easier if I wouldn't have forced things through holes and round peg, square hole type stuff.
Yeah, and I got a real big jump start on that. So when I was in my last marriage, and I was miserable, and I was getting sober again for real this time. Like it's the first time I actually like did the steps. I was doing it for me for once. Like I was so afraid that I was going to continue living like this. Like I didn't get courage. I just got more afraid of living forever like this. Like that's the truth. Like I never got courage. I always say I could never get courage. What I do is I figure out it's fear, and then I do it anyway because I don't want fear to rule my life.
The challenge with that as well.
It's not my thing. It's just not my thing. So anyway, the short version is I was in a bad marriage. I had kids, two of my own, one with her, and I was miserable. I had about 4 years sober. I was making sure it wasn't me. So I did all the work. I did all the steps. I worked with my sponsor. I spent years making sure like, hey, is this just me because I'm, an addict and I'm not happy, is it just me? And I thought I was sacrificing for my kids, right? Like that's the thing. Like I was in this relationship, I was miserable, but it was the right thing to do for my kids, right? Like that's the lie we tell ourselves, right? That's the lie. That's one of the lies, right? And Spirit says to me, like I get this message from Spirit that like your kids, they show me that your kids don't listen to what you say. Like they're not. Did you ever listen to what your mom told you to do or your dad told you to do? No, they're looking at you as an example to see how to handle life. That's all you are. You don't have the power to control what your kids become and all the things you think. Like that's not you. Who do you think you are? You're not God. Like that's what Spirit said to me. Like God has control of who your kids are and what their plan is. You don't. You are just an example of how they're going to look at you, and hopefully someday they'll say, I want to do this because my dad did this, right? Like that's all we are, is an example of living. And they said, now what example are you showing them? And I had to take a real hard look at it. And I said, well, I'm teaching my son that he should stay where he's miserable. He should stay in a relationship that he's unhappy in. He should, and then I had to look at it and I go, he's miserable because I'm being an asshole to my son. I knew, like, because I was so unhappy with her and she was so always nice, it was just this weird dynamic. That was being I did not like the father I had become. I was being a total jerk to my own son because of this. So it was a very hard decision, right? To be like, you're miserable, she's miserable, I'm miserable, everybody's miserable. And society teaches me I'm supposed to stick that out because that's the right thing to do. But Spirit showed me, no, you want to show your kids that they should be happy no matter what. You want your kids to grow up to be happy, right?
Or at least if you're unhappy, make a change.
Make a change. And so to end it all is like, what happened is I learned my own voice by doing program, by learning my own ego, knowing my own fears, by knowing when it's my fear. Now when Spirit communicates with me, I can tell the difference. And it's not because I can hear them clearer.
That I think is probably what you're trying to teach people, is how to hone when you're getting direction. That's a recurring theme with guests on this show as well, is, hey, something told me to do this. Hey, something told me to call this person. Something told me to take that job. Somebody told me not to do that. And when you hone that in, it does seem like life gets fluider. So I'm excited for you. I'm glad you get to teach people. I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for your candor and inspiring story. I mean, that's what we're doing here. Do you have a story, mission, purpose, or company trying to help people and you need a platform to get your message out? hit me up on Instagram, Vibe with Humanity. Thanks for watching, guys.